In today's video, I will be sharing 20 awesome fall DIYs using mostly Dollar Tree supplies. I've gathered a bunch of my recent fall projects along with some of my all-time personal favorites from the past. I really hope these DIYs give you tons of fall inspiration. So let's get started. I am going to turn these charming weaved straw baskets into pumpkins. You'll need 2 baskets. Now, if you look on top, you'll see where the straw ends, so keep an eye on that. And so to make the pumpkin, you're just going to flip one over, lining up and connecting the ends like so, and the basket should fit together nicely. You can hot glue them together, but I wanted to reuse these and not just use them as pumpkins for a few months of the year, so instead I'm just going to use some temporary glue dots. I got these at Dollar Tree and I just trimmed them to fit, and I place several around the top of one basket. And then I turn one basket over and place it on top of the other, making sure to line up the ends. Now, if you're buying these baskets to make the pumpkin, you will definitely want to make sure the 2 are similar in size, because if one is larger than the other, then it just won't fit together nicely. So I'm just going to make another one. This one's in gray, and I apply the removable glue dots all around, although you can hot glue them as well. To make the stem, I'm going to trim an old stick from my yard, so I trim one side at an angle, making sure the other side is cut straight, and I glue one on top of each pumpkin. You can embellish these however you want. You can add some bows, ribbons, raffia, or greenery, but I do like it the way it already is, so I'm going to leave it just like that. It's very simple and charming. I picked up this MDF pumpkin from Dollar Tree. I'm going to paint it a couple of colors. So first I apply tape, making sure the bottom of the tape is lined close to the center. I'm going to paint the bottom half with Waverly Antique Wax. I'm using a damp cloth to apply the wax, and I'm being extra careful around the tape because I don't want any of the color seeping through. Once that has been applied all over, I use the clean side of the cloth to wipe out any excess. Then I carefully remove the tape. I reapply the tape, lining up the cleaner side of it towards the center painted edge. I'm going to paint the top half black with this acrylic paint from Rich Art, which I got from Dollar Tree. So with a foam brush, I paint that on all over, being extra careful around the tape's edge. I bought a pack of fall words from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to use Welcome Fall on the pumpkin. I will be painting it with white acrylic paint, and I brush that on all over the surface and sides. Wow, look how beautiful it looks already. I apply some glue on the back of Welcome Fall, and I place that towards the right side of the pumpkin. I tie a thicker jute cord on the handle and I am done. A very quick and easy DIY. I really love how this turned out. Next project, I'm going to be using this wooden tray. It was $3 from the Dollar Tree Plus section. I'm going to stain it using Bear's water-based stain in the shade Special Walnut. Now, one thing about these Dollar Tree natural unpainted wood decor, often there's splotches of dried glue all over. Now that part won't absorb stain. You usually can't see it, but I know it's there. And they're typically around the joints, so I tried my best to scrape off any that I saw. I also gave it a good sanding all over. So with a cloth, I apply the stain all over. Unfortunately, there were so many areas that didn't take the stain. I didn't like the way it looked, but you know, I did have a backup plan because I kind of expected it. I decided to just sand the areas of the tray, especially in the noticeable areas, just to make it look naturally worn out and distressed, so a bit rustic. So after all that, I really did like the way it was looking. I'm going to paint a strip of green paint in the center, about 2 inches from the sides, or the width of 2 painter's tape, and I'm using the shade Moss from Waverly Chalk Paint. So I brushed that in the center, and I believe I applied a couple of coats because I wanted it to be completely covered, and I really didn't want to see any of that wood underneath. Now before it dries completely, I pull out the tape. The paint might look a little bit uneven because some areas are still wet, but it will dry to an even color. I'm going to add some stenciling in the center using the same fall pack from Amazon. I'm stenciling in a cute little pumpkin patch as well as a phrase Hello Fall, which I had to use 2 different stencils for that. I place the pumpkin towards the right side and then I apply some painter's tape all around to hold it down. For paint color, I'm using Hello Hobby's chalk paint in the shade Linen, and I did add some white chalk paint to brighten it up a bit. I applied that in circular motions, but the areas where the stencil looked a bit narrow or delicate, I just carefully dabbed or pounced on those areas. I pull out the stencil and wow, I'm loving how it's looking so far. Then I place Hello down towards the left of the pumpkin and I tape it down and I apply the stencil. And underneath Hello I place Fall, and that's stenciled just beautifully. Once this has completely dry, I will be buffing in some clear wax to protect the surface and give it a nice polished finish. And we are done! I really love how this rustic tray turned out. You will need 46 tumbling tower blocks. I separate 36 blocks and group them in threes, which I will be gluing together. I stain the blocks with the shade Early American from Varathane. I apply the stain with a cloth, and I'm only going to apply the stain on the tops and sides of the groups of threes. For the remaining 20, I group them in fives and apply the stain only on the top as well as the 2 sides. Once everything is dried completely, I glue the 3 blocks side by side, and I'll end up with 12 blocks. Then I glue the 5 together side by side, and I'll make 4 of these. After that, I glue 2 blocks of threes together, just like DIY number 1, and this will thicken up the pumpkin. Then I glue the ends together, and I'll end up with a nice thick rectangle. I move on to the group of 5 and glue them together as well. To assemble, I glue them together like so, starting with the taller one and alternating the blocks. I bought this pack of various Harvest DIY words from Dollar Tree. They came in a pack of 6. I'm going to be using Hello Fall for this one. I'm going to paint the words white, and I brush that on with a foam brush. And then I glue the stems, which came from my yard, and I decided to just place them on the tall blocks. And finally, I hot glue down Hello Fall. I place that on the bottom right, and I am done. You can add bows, raffia, or greenery on the stems, customize it to your style, but I do like it just like that. For this project, I will be using this wooden panel board from the Dollar Tree Plus section. This is a nice little panel and you can definitely use either side, but for this project, I'll be using the flat surface without a frame. I'm going to paint it with Hello Hobby's chalk paint in the shade Olive Oil. So I brushed that on all over using a chalk paintbrush. I bought a 16-pack of fall stencils on Amazon, and I'll be using several of these stencils for this project. I'll also have that link below if you want to check it out. For this project, I'll be using Fall Sweet Fall, as well as the ones that have a variety of leaves on them. For paint, I'll be using some white chalk paint. This one's from Folk Art. I'm going to be stenciling and alternating the different leaves along the outer edge of the wood. I pick out a leaf to start, it really doesn't matter which one. And I start in the corner and I tape that down with some painter's tape, and then I just apply the paint with a stencil brush. I go in circular motions as well as dabbing if I feel like I need to be a little more gentle. I carefully remove the stencil and I pick out another leaf or acorn, stenciling that in right next to it until I have a complete border. Now you can fit about 5 or 6 different stencils, really depending on how close or far apart they are, You can also apply this in a variety of fall colors. I think that would have been so beautiful as well. I do blot the back with a paper towel before moving on to the next one, but you know, this paint actually dried really fast and I really didn't have any issues with smudging underneath. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to place Fall Sweet Ball right in the center. I tape around it and then I apply the paint with a stencil brush going in circular motions. I peel that out and wow, this is so beautiful. I'll be sealing this with some clear wax, but I do want it to completely dry before applying that. You can definitely use your sealer of choice, and this beautiful fall DIY is done. I had an extra 24-inch 1x2-inch wood from a previous DIY. It came in a pack of 4 from Home Depot. You can also find these a foot long at Dollar Tree as well. I trimmed them down to the following measurements. I'll be painting them orange, and I'm using Rich Art Orange from Dollar Tree, which is a little too bright, so I will be muting it down with some gray. The gray was a little too light, so I added a drop or 2 of black. With a foam brush, I paint that on the wood, and I really love how this orange turned out. Now it will darken a bit once it dries. I want it to look naturally distressed, so with a sanding sheet, I remove some of the paint. I'm going to stack the wood to make a pumpkin, and I start off with a smaller wood, apply glue on that, and then sandwiching the 2 taller wood pieces in the center. Then topping it off with the smaller one. For the stem, I picked some sticks from my yard and I trimmed it down and I glue that on top. You can embellish the pumpkin with raffia, ribbons, greenery, or leave it as is. This ribbon's from Dollar Tree and I just cut off a piece and tie a bow. This rustic pumpkin was very easy to make and it came out adorable. Inspired by Pottery Barn's handcrafted terracotta pumpkins, so I wanted to make something similar at a fraction of the cost. I'll also be using a couple of these Dollar Tree faux pumpkins. They definitely have a variety to choose from, but I think these are just the right size, and I'll also be using this larger one, which I believe I got from Target a while back. I'm going to paint this pumpkin a light color. I want it to be light with some warmth, so I start out with some white chalk paint, and I'm going to warm it up with khaki from Apple Barrel. I'm going to add some baking soda to the paint, which will add some texture to the pumpkins, making it more gritty. You know, I really don't measure the amount. There's really no precise formula, but personally, I do like the mixture to be on the thicker side. When I'm applying the paint, I really like using a round sponge brush. I mean, just look at how smoothly and quickly they cover the surface. Now for the larger pumpkin, I decided to just spray paint it first with a primer since it is larger. And once that dries, I make more of the baking soda mixture. I think this time I added some territorial beige to it, and then I applied that all over with the sponge brush. Now there were these little branches or vines sticking out. They're not bad, but I just wanted to clean up the stem area, so I snipped it off. Now to add some dimension and to make it look a bit rustic, I'll be lightly brushing in this chalk paint from Waverly in the shade Sandstone. I'm just using a natural bristle brush and I'm going to lightly dry brush the paint in different areas. I'm steering clear of making it look too uniform, so I'm not exclusively placing it in the indented areas or the furrows, but maybe in just a few. So I dab on the paint sporadically here and there. If there are any harsh lines or strokes, I blend it out with a damp paper towel, and that gives it a beautiful and natural shading. For the larger pumpkin, I do the same thing, just applying that sandstone color. You can definitely use any color you like. You can even brush and blend in some deeper, warmer colors. I'm also using a little sponge to blend in the sandstone, and that gave it a beautiful effect as well. And we are done. A super easy DIY, and I really love how this one turned out. For the next DIY, I'm going to make a little wooden tray to hold some fall decor. You are going to need two 12-inch 1x2s. These are from Dollar Tree, and you can also get these at your local hardware store for a lot less. I also trimmed these 1-inch square dowels, which I got at Home Depot, so that I have 4 at 3.5 inches, and I'll be using 3 1-gallon paint stir sticks as well. Before assembling, I'm going to add some color to the wood, and I'm going to be staining the 1x2s and the paint sticks in the shade Special Walnut. This is a water-based stain from Behr. I do about 1 layer of this because I really don't want it to be too dark. And then I wipe it down to remove any of the stain that didn't absorb. You know, one thing that I really do love about using a water-based stain is that it dries really fast, so that's a big plus for me. So after I stain the 1x2s, I move on to the paint sticks. Next, I'm going to paint these square dowels in the shade Pumpkin from Waverly Chalk Paint. Now, although this is a beautiful color for fall, not too long after, I started having second thoughts. It was a little too orange, but I could have just added some gray to mute it down, but instead, I just decided to paint over it, but this time with the shade Moss from Waverly. And I actually like this a lot better. I thought it would complement the wood nicely. To assemble, I placed the 1x2s on its side, and then I apply some glue on the ends of the square dowels. And I place that on the ends of the 1x2s like so. And then I glue another one on top, applying glue on the ends of the square dowels, as well as in between the blocks. Because I'm only using wood glue, I do clamp it and I give it some time to dry before moving on. To make the base, I'm going to measure mark and trim the paint sticks down so that they'll fit snugly inside the tray. I'll be using these smaller square dowels to hold up the paint sticks. I get these in a large pack on Amazon, and I'm going to match the stain color of the wood, but also making sure to keep the side that I'll be gluing unstained. And then I apply some glue on one side of the square dowel, and I place that on the shorter bottom side of the rectangle. I glue the other one on the opposite side, and then I apply a little bit of glue on the ends of the paint sticks where it will touch the square dowels, and then I place them down. Since you still see the curves from the handles, I do alternate the direction in which I place them down. You really don't have to, especially since you'll be placing things on top, but I do like the way it looks that way instead. Now, instead of using this as a tray, you can also turn it into a frame. You can glue on some wooden words on top. I think that would look beautiful as well. But to decorate for fall, I'll be using this fern filler bouquet from Dollar Tree, and I place that inside a simple glass bottle. And then I just add some pine cones and little pumpkins to fill it up. But you certainly can place whatever you want inside, and this adorable DIY is done. You'll need 16 tumbling tower blocks. First, I glue 4 blocks together side by side. Then I glue 3 together, and I'll make 2 sets. And finally, I glue 2 together, making 2 sets of those as well. To assemble, I apply glue all over the front of the block of 4, and I place the block of 3 on the front and back of that. Then I glue the block of 2 on the front and back as well. And finally, I glue the single blocks on the front and back. I'm going to paint this pumpkin white. I want it to look a little distressed without having to sand it, so I'm using this chalk paintbrush to give it a weathered look, but really any brush with bristles would do. And I just lightly brush that on all over. For the stem, I went outside and cut off some branches, and I trimmed them with a miter box and saw, and then I added some watered down brown paint on the top. I glue that on top of the pumpkin and I'm done. Another adorable yet easy to make pumpkin that took minutes to complete and will complement any fall decor style. I thought I would make something using these extra 1x2s, some left over from prior projects. You can get these at Dollar Tree or even cheaper by the foot at your local hardware store. I'll be making a couple wooden pumpkins, so I'm going to trim them down so that I have 4 trimmed down to 6 inches and 4 trimmed down to about 3.5 inches. Of course, the actual height is really up to you. To make sure that the sets of 4 are equally cut, I do like to tape them together before trimming. I'm going to glue 4 of equal heights together to form a cross or an X, so I place 2 pieces of wood side by side with a couple tumbling blocks in between. This creates just enough space that's not too far apart to glue another piece of wood on top, perpendicular to the other 2. So I'm just going to apply some wood glue. You can also use hot glue on the narrow side of the wood right on the outer edge. And then I apply glue on the remaining wood. And at this point, I stand up the wood glue pieces, and then I glue that last piece on to make what looks like a cross. And then I just wrap some painter's tape around it to hold it together while it dries. I follow the same process with the 3.5-inch wood. I place 2 pieces side by side with a tumbling block in between. Then I glue the remaining 2 pieces on the opposite sides while making sure the base is level and flush. I'm going to paint the pumpkin white, but I do also want it to have that rustic crackle effect. So to achieve that, first I'm going to brush on a layer of glue. I'm just using Elmer's school glue, but you can use any brand of school glue. They do all crackle nicely. A thinner layer will give smaller, finer crackles, and the thicker will give larger cracks. So after applying a layer all over the larger pumpkin, I apply it all over the smaller one. I don't put any of the glue on the bottom, but once that's completely coated, I let that dry for a few minutes. I want it to be tacky, but you definitely don't want it to dry completely. Otherwise, it's not going to crackle. After a few minutes, I apply the paint, and I try to apply it carefully, making sure my brush has just enough paint on it and as much as possible going in the same direction. If the glue is still really wet and you brush over it several times, the paint may start to come off, but if that happens, just gently go over it again with a good amount of paint on the brush. I also stuck a little dowel through the center of the pumpkin, which made it easier to paint. I do make sure to apply the paint on top, leaving the bottom unpainted. Then I let that dry completely. It will take some time to dry, or you can just expedite the drying time by using a heat tool or a hairdryer. Now you can leave it as is, but I want to add some gold leafing around the bottom. I'm just going to be using imitation gold leaf. So first I need to apply the adhesive where I want the gold leaf to stick. I'm using Mona Lisa metal leaf adhesive, which I got on Amazon. So I just apply that around the bottom. Now I don't want to apply it evenly in a straight line, but instead I just kind of dab it along the top, varying the heights and keeping that top edge uneven and kind of jagged. And I just go about 1 inch from the bottom. For the larger wooden pumpkin, I apply the adhesive a little higher, about 1.5 inches or so, since it's taller. Once I finish applying the adhesive, I let that dry. Now it does go on white, and it's ready once everything is clear and tacky to the touch. I got the sheets of imitation gold leaf on Amazon as well. I do cut them into strips first. I'm using scissors, but a rotary cutter also cuts it nicely. To apply, I just carefully place them over the adhesive, gently tapping it in place. I also use a soft brush to push it down. But because of the shape of the wood, the gold leaf easily gets caught, breaking it apart and leaving some areas uncovered. But that was just fine. I just kept applying the strips, overlapping them until all the areas were covered with the gold leaf. Before I brush out the excess, I apply the gold leaf on the other one, applying it in small sections until it's fully covered. Then with a soft brush, I gently remove the excess gold. Honestly, this is my favorite part. It's so satisfying. For the stem, I'll be using a couple of these wooden cubes from Dollar Tree, which I'll be staining a dark color. I'll also be using a couple of these wooden leaves, which I got on Temu. I paint the leaves white, and then I apply some adhesive on the outer parts of the leaf. I want to add a little gold to it. Then once it's tacky, I add the gold leaf, and I just flip it over onto the sheet. And then I brush out the excess. Now it's very important to seal this. The imitation gold leaf may tarnish over time since it's not real gold. I like to use a glossy sealer or satin works as well. And this beautiful, stunning DIY is done. I didn't want that extra piece from DIY number 1 to go to waste, so I'm going to make something with it. I'm going to need 3 of the 1 foot 1/4 inch dowels that I used in the first project. This Give Thanks wooden sign from a 6-pack of fall birds which I got from Dollar Tree. And about 23 5.5 inch wooden coffee stirrers. I got these on Amazon, but you can also use popsicle sticks as well. I cover up the 2 holes on the top of the MDF board. Once that dries, I'm going to paint the board with this beautiful antique white color from Apple Barrel. Definitely paint to your preferred color or leave the board as is. So I brushed that on with a chip brush. I only do about 1 coat because I want some of the wood grain underneath to be seen, plus I'm going to lightly sand the board. Once the paint has completely dried, I lightly sand with a fine grit sanding sheet. I'm going to paint the wooden coffee stirrers using multiple fall colors, and to save brushes, I cut up a large foam brush. This one's from Dollar Tree. Now, I do find their foam brushes a little challenging to use with acrylic paint because it's not really dense, but I do love the chunky dowel it comes with. I always save that. So I just divide up the stirrers with the amount of colors I'm going to use, and I paint that on. Then I turn the board over and I mix the sticks in no particular order. I glue them one at a time over the pumpkin. When I'm done gluing, I turn it over and look how beautiful and warm these colors are. I'm going to add some color to the dowels with Waverly Antique Wax. I'm using a lightly damp rag to apply the color, and then I paint Give Thanks with the leftover orange paint. The dowels are going to frame the board, so I add glue on the dowel and place that on the side of the board, and then I glue the other side as well. I measure the top and the bottom, and I trim the remainder dowel to fit. Now I was about done here, and I was just going to glue Give Thanks below the pumpkin, but then I thought it would be nice if I had a little pocket area to place some flowers or stems in. And for that, you'll need 4 tumbling tower blocks and 4 more dowels. Before applying Waverly Antique Wax on the dowels and blocks, I measure and cut the dowels to the width of the frame, then I apply the wax. I glue 3 of the dowels together, and this is going to make the base, and I glue that right in front of the bottom dowel. Then I glue the blocks in pairs, and then glue them down on each corner like so. I take the 4 remaining dowels and space them out evenly over the board, and then I glue them down. I glue Give Thanks right on top of that, and I'm done. I love how I can place little flowers or stems or really anything in it. So simple, a little vintage looking, and absolutely adorable. For the next DIY, I'm going to be making a beautiful neutral fall wreath. I'll be using this grapevine wreath. I get these at Michael's and they're quite inexpensive. For the florals, I grabbed a couple of these fall stemmed maple leaves in ivory, as well as this light floral bouquet. This wreath will have a pretty neutral color palette, but if you want to add a little more color, you certainly can change it up. Now the first thing I do is snip those wired stems off. Then I just tuck in the leaves in the wreath. You can add a little bit of hot glue as well, and I place about 4 or 5 on the bottom half of the wreath, spreading them out. I also place some of the flowers in between a few of the leaves to fill in the gaps. I'm going to be adding a few neutral pumpkins from Dollar Tree. They really have some nice ones this year, like this faux leather pumpkin, as well as this adorable sweater pumpkin. These little ones have clips on them, so it was really easy to attach them onto the wreath. And finally, I placed this thankful wooden sign right in the center. And this wreath is done. You can definitely make it more full, or add more flowers and leaves, or have it go all the way around, but I just love how simple and neutral this one turned out. You will need 10 tumbling tower blocks. I'm going to glue 3 blocks together side by side with the center up on its side like so, and the other 2 laying flat. And I make 2 sets. Then I glue the remaining 4 blocks together side by side. I apply glue on the blocks of 3 and adhere that to the front and back of the block of 4. I'm going to paint the pumpkin with another Rich Art acrylic paint that I got from Dollar Tree in the shade Deep Brown, so I brush that on all over. Because this was so easy to make, I made another one, but this time I added some water to the paint so that it would go on like a stain, and I really like how it turned out. You can really see the difference between the two. I glue the stem on top and we are done. I really love how this turned out. Now I had this idea of stacking them for some height, so I made 2 more and I'm going to paint one of them black. This is another Rich Art paint that I got from Dollar Tree. You know, I completely forgot I bought these paints. I believe I bought these last fall and I didn't really use them. But 1 year later and it's still looking good. So I brushed that black all over and the other I will be leaving as is. And I glue that on top and I'm done. I really love how this turned out. I love how you can mix and match the color and it was so quick to make. Dollar Tree is always my go-to for storage and baskets, and I love their metal wire baskets. And for this project, I will be using this black metal basket. I want to add some wood on the bottom, and so I grab a pack of 1-gallon paint stir sticks. I usually get these at Home Depot, and it comes in a pack of 10 for under a couple of dollars. So I pull out about 4 of these, and I lay them down together side by side, and I place a basket on top so that I can mark the length. I just want to make sure that they'll fit nicely on the bottom of the basket. So I trim them down and I just use my miter box and saw to do that. Once they're trimmed down, I place them down side by side and I'm just going to glue them together by hot gluing some popsicle sticks on the bottom. I used 3 popsicle sticks and I just trimmed them down to fit. For color, I'm going to apply some stain. This is driftwood from Minwax. So I apply the stain on the wood and I wipe that on. And after a few minutes, I do go over and wipe it down to remove any stain that hasn't absorbed. While that's drying, I'm going to add some handles using some nautical rope from Dollar Tree. So I cut the amount that I need, about 15 inches, give or take an inch. To attach, I just bend the ends over the sides of the basket like so, and then I just wrap some jute twine around. I use a little bit of hot glue to hold it in place while I'm wrapping. And I just continue wrapping the ends until I have 2 handles. I drop the wood bottom in the basket and this DIY is done. To decorate for fall, I place this textured glass bottle from Dollar Tree and I'm going to place this adorable baby's breath bouquet inside. This one's from Walmart, and then I drop in a few pumpkins. I got these from Dollar Tree. They have such a beautiful variety of pumpkins this year. And this DIY is done. Using this wooden pumpkin from Dollar Tree. They always have some great unfinished season-themed wooden items like this wooden pumpkin. I also grabbed a pack of their bamboo rings and I'll be using the larger one. So step 1 is to paint the pumpkin. I'm using khaki from Apple Barrel, one of my favorites, and I love using this as a stain. So I add some water to thin it out and then I brush that on the pumpkin. I don't want the paint to go on too thick because I want the wood grain underneath to show through. So after I add the paint, I wipe it down with a paper towel before it dries so you can really see the wood underneath. In the center, I'm going to place this wooden Give Thanks sign from Dollar Tree on top of this scrap wood plank piece from Dollar Tree as well. And I'm going to do that crackle effect on it. So I brush on some school glue all over the top and the sides. I give that a few minutes to get a little tacky. Again, you don't want it to dry completely. After that, I'm just going to brush on white acrylic paint. This one's from Craftsmart, but any paint will work. So I just brush on the paint, trying my best to only go in one direction. You really don't want to go over a section that's already been painted more than once, otherwise the paint may wipe out. But if that happens, just add some more paint on the brush and gently go over that section to add the paint back on. After that, I paint the bamboo ring white as well. I'm kind of just dry brushing it on, and then I also lightly sand some of the paint out because I really want to match the rustic look of the crackled wood. While that's drying, I paint the Give Thanks woodward with the same color as the pumpkin. Look how beautiful it's crackled. I love that it's just the natural wood that you're seeing underneath. Next, I'm going to add some glue on the bamboo ring because I'm going to place that right in the center of the wooden pumpkin. And this is going to mimic the furrows or the indentations of the pumpkin. On the other side of the pumpkin, outside of the bamboo ring, I'm going to glue some dry flowers. I got a pack on Temu and I decided to keep it neutral and just pick out the light and neutral flowers. To glue, I brush on a little bit of Mod Podge on the pumpkin. I'm starting on the bottom and then I place a flower right on top. And I just tap that in place, pressing it down gently. And then I add some more Mod Podge above that. And then I place another flower on top. And to keep that side looking consistent, I apply the Mod Podge all over that section. Now I'm only using 4 on each side, but you certainly can fill the section with as much flowers as you want. You can even add the vibrant colors, but definitely customize to your style. And just like the right side, I do the same thing on the opposite side. I'm applying the Mod Podge and placing a flower on top until that whole side is completed. And then I gently apply a layer of Mod Podge over the flowers and that section. I glue Give Thanks down on the wood, and before I glue that in place on the pumpkin, I decided to place a small bow on top, and so I just ripped off a piece from a Dollar Tree fabric, and I'm just going to tie a simple bow. I glue down the crackle wood in the center, as well as a bow, and I also string through some white rope through the stem, and this DIY is done. I'll be using this wooden pumpkin from Dollar Tree and this 9x6-inch wooden box from Michaels. I'll be placing the pumpkin inside the box, but the pumpkin is just a teeny bit too tall, so I'll be sanding the stem down a bit so that it fits nicely inside. I'm going to apply some water-based stain from Bear in the shade Special Walnut. So I apply that all over with a cloth, and then I do wipe it down to remove any stain that did not absorb. I also stain the back, which I'll probably DIY something back there at some point. I'm going to glue down 3 giant popsicle sticks on the bottom of the box, so I measure mark and trim all 3 down. After that, I paint them white, and at first I thought I would just lightly dry brush the chalk paint over, giving it a nice distressed appearance, but then I changed my mind and I decided to just paint it completely white. And then I took a coarse grit sanding sheet and slowly went over each popsicle stick to give it a light distressing. I placed them inside the box, spreading them out evenly. I also placed a couple tumbling blocks on the sides as a guide for the popsicle sticks on the ends, and then I glue them down with hot glue. I do the same thing on the other side, placing 2 blocks on the ends before gluing down the popsicle sticks. And then I glue the center stick, making sure it's centered. I'm going to give the pumpkin a nice crackled and distressed appearance, so first I remove the bow and peel out the little welcome sign. I do give the area underneath the welcome sign a little sanding because it did leave a sticky residue. First thing I'm going to do is paint the pumpkin with this dark brown chalk paint from Hello Hobby, but you can use any color for the base. So I brush that on all over the top and the sides. The back won't be seen, so I do leave that as is. This chalk paint does cover nicely, so I just do 1 coat of that. And then I let it dry completely. You can use a hairdryer or a heat tool to speed up the drying process. To get that crackle finish, I'll be using good old-fashioned school glue. You can use a crackle medium if you like, but honestly, school glue works just as well for me and it's cheap. So I start with the sides, and you really want to apply a generous amount. I'm just pouring it directly from the bottle, but you can also pour some in a container and brush it on from there. And then I pour a good amount over the front surface, and then I spread that on with a brush, and you just want to make sure it's completely covered. You're going to give the glue about a minute or so to get a little tacky, but you know, I have done this while the glue is still wet and I still do get good results, but you just don't want the glue to dry out. Next, I'm going to brush some chalk paint. This is Pumpkin from Waverly, and when you're brushing, you want to brush in one direction. Try not to go over it more than once, or else you end up removing a big chunk of the paint. If you do need to go over a section, just make sure your brush is full of paint and just gently go over that section. Here I sped up the video showing you how nice this crackles. I'm using a heat tool, so it didn't really take that long to dry. In the center, I'm going to place this Hello Autumn wooden sign from Dollar Tree, and I paint it white. And then I glue that right in the center of the pumpkin. Before gluing the pumpkin down, I glue down 2 tumbling blocks on top of the popsicle sticks, like so. And then I glue the pumpkin on top. And finally, I rub on some antique wax over the white wooden words with a damp cloth. It was a bit too bright. Seal it with your sealer of choice, and this wooden decor sign is done. Next DIY, I'm going to be using this wooden wall shelf from Dollar Tree. I want to make a wooden tray to display some fall decor. I'll also be using 8 wooden craft cubes and about 4 bamboo skewers. These are thicker than the ones you get at Dollar Tree. I take out the wood, and I'll be saving the other pieces for another DIY. I'm going to stain the wood with the shade Early American from Varathane, but you can certainly paint whatever color you prefer. And I just apply that with a cloth. Then I take a skewer and mark the height of the wood, and I trim down the skewers so that I have 8 of them at that height. I paint them black with black acrylic paint. And then I paint the cubes as well, avoiding the top and bottom because I will be applying glue on those areas. I take a craft cube and place that on the corner, and then I take a paint stick and I use that to make sure it goes on evenly on the corner. I then apply the rest of the cubes using the paint stick to make sure it's placed evenly. Then I turn it over and glue down the rest of the cubes, aligning it with the cubes above it so that it looks like one long piece. For the handles, I was going to glue 4 skewers side by side, but then ended up liking 3 spaced out instead. So I painted the tops of the cubes before gluing down the skewers. I apply some wood glue on the skewers and blocks, and then I glue them down, 3 on each side spaced out evenly. Once it has dried, I do seal it and I am done. This really came out beautiful. I love the black and the wood, and it's perfect for displaying any fall decor. For the next DIY, I'll be using the back of our sign. It was just a beautiful blank canvas, and I just couldn't waste it. So this will be a 2-sided fall decor. Since the sides are already painted the shade olive oil, I'm going to continue that on the side and paint the frame that color. For the surface, I'll be painting it a lighter color, so I cover up the edge with some painter's tape so that I don't accidentally get the darker color on it. So I just applied the beautiful chalk paint color around the outer frame. I have this Hello Pumpkin wooden sign that I'll be placing on top. This one's from Michael's. Because the word pumpkin is quite large, I'll be placing it on top of this wooden plank from Dollar Tree, left over from a prior project, which I will trim down to about 11 5/8 by 4 inches. I do want the width to be slightly less than the board so that you don't see it on the other side. I just score it several times with a utility knife until the pieces snap off. I'm going to dry brush some of that olive oil color on top. I want it to look a bit distressed, so I just lightly go over the plank until I like the way it looks. I also make sure to apply the paint on the sides just so that it blends nicely with the frame. Then I apply that same color over the word hello. For the rest of the board, I want it to be lighter than the border, but not pure white, so I add some dark brown to the white chalk paint and I mix that up. It was missing some warmth, so I added a drop of khaki from Apple Barrel as well. So I just brushed that on. I did cover up the border with some painter's tape just so I won't get any paint on that. Then I paint the same color over the word pumpkin. It's going to be resting on top of the trim plank, so this color will be a nice contrast. I'll be stenciling in the stacked pumpkins But before I do that, I apply some glue on the back of the pumpkin woodward. You can also use hot glue. I just like having a little bit of time to readjust. So I place that right on the center of the plank. I'm going to place the stencil towards the top right corner. I did trim it a bit on the right side with a paper trimmer just because I wanted it closer to the corner. I apply some painter's tape to hold it down and to protect the surface, and I'm just recycling and reusing the ones I've already used. I'm using white chalk paint from Folk Art, but you can certainly use any color like orange or green or even black. To put the sign together, I apply some glue on the back of Hello, and I place that towards the left of the pumpkins. Then I apply some glue on the edge of the plank, and then I place that down towards the bottom like so. And this adorable two-sided fall sign is done. I'm going to need 36 tumbling tower blocks, which I bought at Dollar Tree. One box comes with 72 blocks. I put aside 36 blocks, and the rest I will be using for the next DIYs. First I glue 3 blocks together side by side, and I make 12 of these. Then I take 3 of them and glue them together end to end, and I make 2 sets. I glue 2 together end to end, and I make another set as well. I take the group of 3 and I apply glue on the front and adhere the matching pair onto it like so. And I do the same thing with the rest of the blocks, gluing the matching pairs together. I'm going to paint the blocks orange using acrylic paint from Rich Art, which I bought at Dollar Tree. Now this orange is a little bit too bright, so I'm going to mute it down by adding a little bit of gray. And I mix it up, and look at this beautiful shade of orange. So I brush that on all over the blocks, and I use a foam brush to paint that on. I want to lightly distress it, and I do so with a fine grit sanding sheet. And as I sand it, the color does change a bit, which I love even more. For the stems of the pumpkin, I'm going to be using craft tubes from Dollar Tree. I pull out 3 and lightly stain it with Waverly Antique Wax. I add a drop of glue on the top of each pumpkin and place the cube on top of that. I want to add a little sign hanging on the tallest pumpkin, and so I cut off the word thankful off of this rub-on transfer sheet that I got at Dollar Tree. I place that on a popsicle stick. I measure the length I need, trim it down, and spray paint it gold. Then I peel off the backing of the transfer and place it on top of the popsicle stick, and then I rub the word onto the wood. And that peels off beautifully. To hang, I hot glue jute cord on the back. I place the sign on the tallest pumpkin and I'm done. You can embellish with bows and some greenery or leave it as is. This was very easy to make, yet so adorable. I was at Pottery Barn the other day, and I just love the look of their large fall leaf branches in a vase, and I wanted to make a smaller version of it. I bought a couple of these tall maple leaf bush from Walmart. They were under $4, but you can also get some at Dollar Tree like the ones I used from the prior DIY. I'm going to be placing them inside this Dollar Tree glass vase. I love the shape of this one. I place the leaves inside, making sure to spread out the stems. And then at the base, I add some pumpkins all around, some pine cones and greenery, and that's it. But then I wanted to take it up a notch, and I ended up switching the vase with this larger glass vase that I had. And just by doing that, it gave it an even more high-end look. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, will you please give it a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Until next time, bye!